Good evening. You're listening live to the Extreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob, broadcasting to you from the Pine Hills Palace in the Extreme Studios just west of Orlando, Florida. I've got from the great Midwest RDV joining me tonight as we go back to our throwback standards, which means 80s movies, as I'm a child of the 80s, and you, RDV, sir, are a child of the 90s, early aughts, I
Well,
guess.
I'm as old as this movie is.
Well, that's interesting because tonight's movie from 1985 in the fall is Remo Williams' The Adventure Begins, a.k.a. let's hire the guy that was in James Bond movies and script writing for several of the big movies, and let's create a whole new sequence of books that have been around since the 60s to 70s called the Destroyer series. And let's make a pretty damn good first half of a movie with a really shitty second half, aka another James Bond film, because that's what I feel like we have in my first reaction. Now, RDV, I have seen this film before, but for you, was this a first watch? Give me your initial impressions.
Definitely first watch for me because I've seen Fred Ward in Tremors, and I just never that was the only time I ever experienced to him. Actually, no, he was in one of the Crow movies playing one of the bad guys. Like that's the only two movies I've ever seen him in. So when I saw Rib Williams' Adventure Begins, I saw the trailer for it. And I was just like, this seems very very hokey.
It
Um,
moved. The movie bombed.
it bombed tremendously. Some would argue that well, it deservedly should because like you said, it's half of it's good, the other half is where were they going?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Oh my God, we have so much to talk about with all that because you're absolutely 100% right. I think that's the
it's
general consensus of it.
probably the best thing about this movie is the Statue of Liberty stuff because it actually was shot. Someone's and someone's on this actual Statue of Liberty. Other one was actually like they built a replica of it. So you actually get to get the cool stuff. Sis, you get to see the Twin Towers in here too. That's
Hmm.
something you're never going to see anymore unless you watch older movies. You're not going to see the Twin Towers. You get to see the Statue of Liberty when it was actually being fixed up or refurbished, you say. So I've never seen that personally, So
Hmm.
it gets get to see the scaffolding all around it too. That's probably I guess that's probably been a really cool thing growing up and then seeing on the news how they're working on the Statue of Liberty, seeing the scaffolding. That's like a one in a lifetime event. I don't think
Absolutely.
I don't think they've ever done anything since then.
Well, we've talked about before here on the Extreme Movie Show. We try not to get political with movies. We try to really talk more about what we like, didn't like, what we thought worked and didn't, and share some experiences and compare them to the way movies were before in the past and in the future. And so, those that are unfamiliar with the James Bond films, or mostly just familiar with the more recent ones, the young 20-something Professor Pixel, who's not here tonight, and I have been going over periodically in order all of the movies, and he has not seen a lot of them. I know RDV you have, and so
Mhm.
we're getting up to the 80s James Bond movies, specifically getting ready to start a Timothy Dalton one here in a couple of weeks, the first of the two, and we talk about how Bond's evolved and changed from the characters, the actors, how the scripts were changed to do it. And one of the interesting things here in the 80s that you and I have commented on is 1985, for a lot of reasons, we've said is kind of the year that movies went from being like the karate movies we would see, the Chuck Norris films, the
Mhm.
any of that stuff, to more of the guns and explosion stuffs like Commando. And not that we dislike them, we felt like it
No.
was getting a bit over the top. And Remo Williams coming out at this time was pretty interesting because there was a lot of hype in the sense that, hey, if we could make a James Bond that's not goofy like Moonraker, even though people love Roger Moore, myself included,
Mhm. Yeah.
can we have an alternative? I mean, and again, we've got JCVD getting ready to come on the scene. We've got all this stuff going on. So it was a perfect time to take a franchise that had been around 70, 80 books at that
Y-
time, but that was slightly different. And that's what we get in the first
You,
half. And
you know what?
unfortunately, they try to do something in the second half and it doesn't work.
You know what really worked for me was the fact that it's Fred Ward.
He's a likable
That,
guy.
this felt like a canon classic movie.
Yes.
This felt like basically should have had Michael Dudikoff do this instead. That would have been much more believable for me because Dudikoff did a lot of these weird movies like this.
Hmm.
Fred Ward was kind of not. He was kind of the charming guy, but he was not Charles Bronson. He was not Burt Reynolds. Um, he was just the guy that I don't know. I wouldn't say make him as a lead star.
And that was one of the gripes about the movie. Some people thought you're going to make like a James Bond type of franchise starting off with this, and he's your lead guy. I had zero issues with him. I thought he fit the role perfectly. I think the opening gambit where they bait him in and kill him off literally and figuratively, great shit, especially compared to some of the goofy stuff we were seeing in the 80s. This was pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole thing, too, that is mentioned a lot in this movie
So
despite their going into the Star Wars Reaganism type of defense stuff, which is the plot device, which is just boring as hell. They're really supposed to be defending the Constitution and talking about it. So it's supposed to be like America's James Bond.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
saving
yeah.
America from commies and just, you know, people that've gotten too high on the CAD and from the inside out from the government. That's a cool idea.
How old was Fred Ward in this film? Was he in his 40s?
I don't even think he was that old. He was somebody, I think, from Broadway. He's a very slight individual, very young-looking guy. Because even though you see a physical transformation with Fred Ward's character after he gets killed off and they do the surgery routine, what got nominated for an Oscar was the fact that they transformed him after 3 or 4 hours of makeup into looking like a North Korean, or a Korean, I should say.
Yeah.
So that was the amazing part. He looked phenomenal in that role.
Because whenever I think of Fred Ward, I think of Billy Jack, Tom Laughlin.
Right.
The kind of like, yeah, that's what that person for that movie, and that's pretty much all they're known for. I don't. So Remo Williams was like a movie outside of Tremors.
Mm-hmm.
That was about it. I personally have not seen a lot of movies, but I also have not heard his name mentioned in anything other than maybe possibly that Crow movie. I forget what it was, like Crow 3 or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, you and I have discussed several Walter Hill films, and one we did a while back, which is surprisingly good for a lot of people that we always recommend, is a movie called Southern Comfort, where a bunch of weekend reservists kind of screw around with the locals, and then they get hunted down. He's in that movie. I mean, that's when I first remember, because he's speaking French and all that, and he's just kind of evil. He's a nice, rugged Texan kind of guy, and he's, like I say, he's likable in the role. He's not a sophisticate like you would think of, say, Pierce Brosnan or Roger Moore, nor is he a pure, you know, alpha like you think of with Connery. So he's a nice blend of what, at the time in the mid-'80s, was your typical New York cop. And so, for those of you who don't know the whole story, the idea is that basically there's this secret organization called Cure that basically works for the president only, and it's off the books. It's kind of like the Star Chamber type of thing, where they find people and see if they've committed some crimes, and they whack them. And usually they're like high government agencies or that type of thing. And so here what you see is a cop early on in a great sequence of New York. I mean, this just feels like New York. He's got a nice little left punch going on here. He sees a guy being chased by some dudes, and he rolls up on him. And it turns out the dude that was being chased turns around and whacks him with the board. So they have a little fight, and he ends up surviving. It's a nice little sequence. Then he gets knocked off in the middle of night into the water in his car, and he gets rescued by divers. But they got cut to a funeral, which is his, with the guy that knocked him over, and he wakes up in a hospital. And this is a great little opening gambit.
They gave him the same face. They just shaved his mustache.
Yeah,
you actually
and the nose. They did a prosthetic nose, I think, because it looks really beaky. And then when he after that, that's there too.
Yeah, they didn't really change much for him. But I want to talk about Joel Grey. Joel Grey, I've known him first from The Old Man.
Right.
He's the really old dude.
Yep.
Yeah. And seeing him in a younger version of this, he's still a dick.
He's the master of Sinanju, the martial art that ninjutsu, karate, all of them came from, like, which is kind of silly.
It's like he's basically
Joel Grey was in his 50s at this time. Holy shit.
I know, right? Because he was in his 90s, an old man.
Yes, you're right. Oh my God. And that was really disgusting to look at. In a good way.
Yeah. So seeing basically what happens, Fred Ward ends up getting recruited for this first of a kind Black Ops CIA, but it's not CIA. It's its own. It's called Cure.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, because they love the band so much. No. So Wllford Brimley is like the nerd guy, and he is. I have this one computer that connects to all those other services out there. I can tech into anything whenever I want to. I'm like, that's fantasy in 1985. And then you have what's the other guy's name? J.A. Preston, who just looks like they just got a random guy off the street. It would have been better if it had been O.J. Simpson. It would have been a little more comedy, but I call him Stubbs. Because that's pretty much what his character is. He's a shady guy. Basically, he's like, I recruit you in this, and then you find out later that he lost his arm in a war in Korea. but like I said, his character ends up biting the bullet and turns it later on as it is. And only Remo is left, and Remo is pretty much his character is basically forced to basically like either you work for us or we'll kill you.
Exactly.
And I'd be like, well, if you kill me, guess what? You're screwed because you need me in order to stop this guy Grove. Because they just said, if we don't stop Grove, we might as well just take suicide pills, kill each other, kill ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We'll kill you. So I was like, dude, like they need him more than that he needs them. And having to put up with this Joel Grey character, his annoying old North Korean guy who is not only sexist, but
he's old school.
But he hates he does not like anything that's not rice.
So here's the thing: there was literally dozens of books out by the time this came out. The character had been established. Yes, at the time, people thought, "Wow, what an amazing physical transformation with the makeup to make Joel Grey into this Korean guy who's old, like probably around 70." The thing about it too is I will tell you that in the 80s, those few of us that actually watched it and talked about it, it really wasn't seen as like racist or whatever. It was just like when he's sent into his first kill session, basically is, hey, you need to go in there and take this guy out. I'll be waiting right out front here. Remember, this guy's a killer. Don't screw around. So he gives Remo a gun, and he sneaks into this basement, and there's an old guy sitting there, having rice. And the dude's frail. He looks like he weighs 80 pounds, not even speaking. So he's like, shh. And he's walking around, and he goes up the stairs, and the door's locked, and he's like, how'd you get out of here? And then he says what to me would be the racist line out of it. And he goes, speak ye English, which is funny. Yeah. And then he's like, I'm sorry, I just want to get out of here. Let's not make this difficult. He's actually being a good guy. And he's like, there is no one else here. I am the only one. And then he realizes, oh, shit, I got to kill this old man. And so he goes to shoot him basically because he's approaching when he dodges all his bullets. And it's silly. And you have to kind of buy into it. And it's a tough line because to your point, you're like, fuck you. If you're going to kill me, I'm going to find a way to whack you guys. And then you go, oh my God, he can't whack this old man. So it's a little fantastic, I admit. But I think their relationship, which is what I'm afraid that you're not liking here, is
it's comes Stockholm syndrome.
Kind of, sort of, in a way. But that was the highlight of the comedy aspects of it, because I think the biggest problem missing in the second half of the film, besides sheer boredom, is why the hell didn't these two guys team up to take on the bad guys? Yeah,
and also, where's the Roger Moore sex scene? Where we got the beautiful Kate Mulgrew, for those who know her more as being on Star Trek Voyager.
That's her.
It's her. Yeah.
Okay. Yes,
that's her. Much younger. And she's going after this guy. Basically, we're gonna call him Grover because what is this called? Grover? I can't remember what his name was.
Hans Gruber.
I call him Grover. Anyway, this guy he's basically weapons manufacturer. He wants to basically like pass this weapons and then move on to more things, because he's had dealings with the Space Wars. Remember Reagan had the whole thing, the
Star Wars
program.
That's what it was called.
Yeah, and there's problems. His guns blow up people's faces, and she's trying to get into this whole Harper thing, but the guy owns pretty much majority of the people on the committee and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. It's basically like real life today.
Exactly.
Yes. And so she's looking into it. Basically, they're going to want to end up bumping her off. So Remo's assignment is basically to protect her, but also eliminate
the threat.
The threat, yeah, kill him and assassinate. And after they break into this security compound, get information. Probably the best scene of the whole entire movie is when they break in there. He's like, the guy's cutting the electrical fence. Basically, he's cutting it with the pliers, and Remo's looking at what the heck, and the guy's like, oh, and then you see he has prosthetic arm. He's like, oh, it makes more sense. They get in there, they go their separate ways. Remo gets hunted down by these basically these Dobermans, and I love how he's like, well, I just jumps up, they can't get me, but then you see the dogs one starts climbing the stairs, what the, and he's watching, what the hell? The other ones jump on the ladder, it's hanging there, and then the other one jumps on there, and they pull it down, and they both go up. I'm thinking, what the hell is going on with this movie? there's scenes where it's like meant to be serious, but then it gets like stuff like that. It's just like it's just so out there.
So let's pause on that for a moment, because when I mentioned this is more James Bond than you think, when I sent out when I retweeted the link for it, there's a lot of people that mentioned some things about it on my Twitter timeline. So Guy Hamilton's the guy that directed Goldfinger and something else, Live and Let Die, I believe, right? So this guy knows how to direct action, and a lot of the people in the James Bond franchise, especially say in the first half of the Bond movies, I'd have to verify the second half because there's been so many, but a lot of them would work as, like, say, a second unit director or an action director, and then eventually they would direct a couple of films. Like Peter Lamont did a lot of the title design, so he's got a style to it. And I think that the writer, whose name escapes me, the screenwriter, was the guy that did Moonraker, which was very divisive in the Bond world, and also Live and Let Die, The Spy Who Loved Me, which a lot of people think is great.
Yeah, the writers were Warren Murphy.
I think that's for the books. I'm talking the screenwriter.
Well, no, that's who credit to these movies. You got Richard Sapir, Warren Murphy, and Christopher Wood.
Well, they may have gotten a writing credit for the script, but they hired these Bond people to basically do it, is what it is. You know, so like, hey, if we're going to make a Bond franchise, why not just hire the Bond people? It's, you know, there's like I say, a lot more we'll say about it, and some of it's going to be bad, but to me, it was, how do I say this kind of politely when we're talking
He's
about
armed and dangerous. Meaning armed, he doesn't carry guns. That's the whole point of this movie. It's like, it's just, I will not use guns.
Yeah. And it's weird because, to your point, it's like when you're watching some Roger Moore films, there's some silliness in it that you probably wouldn't. You would see different type of silliness if you saw the first James Bond when you would see Sean Connery, right? With Roger Moore, it's a different kind because they're different people. And here, I had no problems with the Dubrins being kind of goofy and silly because they didn't make this movie a gory bloodfest. It's physical, but if you're a younger kid, you could watch it. Like with the fisticuffs and all that. It's not flat out hardcore violence, especially with what we were seeing in the theaters at that time. So to me, it was almost juvenile-ish in a way. So I didn't have a problem with that, but I can see where you go, hey, this is kind of silly. Here's a guy that's learning how to dodge bullets and run through sand. And you got to admit, the training montages are pretty kick-ass.
Yeah, he runs over the cement and the other guy drowns, dies in the cement chasing him.
I told you, quicksand and cement sinking. We don't see enough of that, right? We see it in Blazing Saddles, a few others, and that's it, right? That horse got it in that 180s movie, but let's not go there.
Yeah.
But to me, at this point here, you're right. I did not have a problem with the plot being something as basic as malfunctioning issues with a gun. In other words, quality control issues. We're seeing it with Boeing currently today. I may or may not have had some consulting experience with some major defense contractors here in Central Florida, and I can tell you that stuff's a big deal. So it was plausible, but the point is they don't fucking do anything with it. It's such a friggin' snore. Like Johnny's mentioning in chat, if they cut it to 90 minutes and made it tighter and quicker, it'd be better.
Here's the other problem. There's no confirmation that they even work for the president.
True. That is true.
So it would have been better if he finds out that they actually are the enemy and he's actually being trained to the wrong thing.
That could have been cool.
That would have been a lot better, you know. Having to turn on them, having to fight them, having to fight the old man, and all. Because it just felt like it was just like, here's A, here's a B. We're gonna train you. We're gonna do a couple of scenes where you see you jumping on things, balancing the balance. Here's this fight scene on the Statue of Liberty where these three guys are trying to knock you off, but he keeps, instead of just like sliding down the pole when he fell. Here's a scene where they basically he's hanging on his pole and like it takes him forever to like, hey, I can just slide down it, get down to the bottom. Yeah. Like, instead, it's just hanging there. It's like it was just so like as I think it was Johnny or Jim. Johnny said that. Yeah, I agree with him. There's no reason this needs to be 2 hours.
Yeah.
This is stretched out way too long. If you're you could have had a cool, like a good 10 minutes, like in a montage scenes where he's working out, you get the music, get the Rocky thing going here. It's like TV5. You need to have that kind of music going on. Especially if you're gonna try to like amp up as a pro-American. Like that's I want more stuff like that. I have the bad guys be.
They definitely didn't lean into the American angle too much.
Yeah, and like it just felt like I'd rather just go watch Invasion USA.
Well, another thing too,
that's the bad thing about this, because Wllford Brimley is pretty cool. I've seen him in other movies. I've seen him Hard Target with Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Mm-hmm.
This just felt like it was just kind of like a letdown to me. I mean, not to knock against Fred Ward. Fred Ward is a good actor. It's just that this felt like a dud movie. I mean, I would love to see Fred Ward do more of his comedy, more of his, like his character he had in Tremors. Like, I like that. Now, if you want to turn it into more of an action star thing, sure, but you need to get rid of the old man. That's how it's done. The whole Korean, the old man.
You can't. That's the basis of it all, though.
Because it sounds like you're just trying to do Kung Fu: The Legend Continues. You know what I mean?
That's an interesting comparison because that would be a TV show that would reunite David Carradine with this character, sort of, kind of.
So have David Carradine be the old man. Why could somebody else dress up in prosthetic? It just felt so weird.
They had a tough time casting that role.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, and I guess what's his name says that Warren Murphy didn't want Joel Grey casting. Didn't like it. I can see because it just felt kind of weird. Like
it was supposed to be tongue in cheek.
And if the Korean guy is so that powerful master, why do they need him?
I hear you.
I don't know. It just it would have been great if they find out like the villains has their own kung fu master and they have their own the guy with the diamond was kind of lame. Yeah,
with the lowercase L.
He uses him
and the diamond wasn't nearly big enough. Let's be honest. That thing should have been a friggin' rock or the whole tooth.
He basically just hits. He pushes them because they're in the room right above the vacuum, the gas room, and he kills the guy. But first he punches the guy, and he knocks him up against the glass. He uses his diamond tooth to cut the glass.
That's cool.
And then he jumps through the glass.
It's much cooler than anything in Die Another Day.
Oh,
I'm not saying because of being a pretty boy in a suit.
No, I'm not saying
that over the years. So
I'm not saying Die Another Day is better. Die Another Day was cringe as well. I don't care. I don't want should have diamond teeth. That's just weird.
I think this first half is.
I need more guns.
I disagree. I think,
or at least some kind of martial arts.
Yeah, to me, the first half is good with some great scenes because I tell you that the stuff that really stands out to me is anything that involves the city in the background and the skyline, like when they're walking on top of the building. I don't mind the whole student-master relationship. I know you're not a fan of it.
No,
it didn't bother me. The Statue of Liberty stuff it stands up to me to this day. When you watch it, I just got done watching a few hours ago. It's fantastic.
It is, and it reminds me of Wllford when they're up on top of that bridge.
It does, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, there you go. You could have brought his character in and be the bad guy.
There's no way Albert Finney was going to be in this.
No.
Saving him for an older James Bond role.
No, Edward James almost.
Oh, stop it. Now you're just poking fun at because you don't want to talk about the second half of the movie, which we need to dive into.
Second movie that lacks the sex scene that should have been in the movie.
Well, I still think this is made for a juvenile audience, not for an adult audience.
This felt like a made-for-TV movie.
Exactly.
And
accessible to all.
That's a problem with it.
Maybe
that's why it flopped.
Well, I think it flopped because one, to your point, you said this earlier, and I've said this a lot too. What are you going to be? Know that and do it. It's very hard to blend a little bit of comedy and action. And when you look at, say, Roger Moore's first outing, or even Sean Connery's, even though Dr. No's sort of solid, and I think Live and Let Die is Moore's first one, there's some hit and misses thing in them. And usually we've talked about in our review of the James Bond films, usually it's about the third film that they really kind of peak as far as the movie and or the character. Same thing with Brosnan. Even it's tough because if this movie did well enough, then and they made a second one or third one, I think some of these things would have been ironed out because as you and I pointed out, by about 88, 89, the whole movie landscape culturally changed dramatically, and what we thought of as the action movies would kind of continue on didn't. So I think, Fred Ward was at the age where they could have done something with this. I don't know if they would have replaced Joel Grey's character. I had no problems with their quipping and dialogue. I thought it was kind of interesting. But I think it was the strongest part of the movie. So that's why when you're watching this, you think of the scenes with these two guys together, not with anybody else, Brimley or anybody else. So when we get to the second half here, when again, she's not a love interest, okay, that's fine. They don't want to do that. They don't want to have a lot of guns. Okay, that's fine. That was at the time different than a lot of these types of movies in the 80s. So I'll give them credit for being different. It's just to your point, make it different enough where You can have some goofy stuff like the Dobermans, which are an extremely smart breed, by the way. That what they did didn't shock me, allegedly. But again, the bad guy, weapons contractor guy, this needed to go back to the rewrite screen. It just didn't work. And now my biggest complaint with the Bond movies is while you know the template, usually the third acts are the worst because they're all a big set piece with like 100 nobodies in the background, somebody counting down backwards in a loud voice, 10, 3, 5, 2, or whatever. And it's just like a waste of time to me. Stupid ass ninjas. I mean, just you name it, whatever got lampooned by Mike Myers, it deserved it. This movie felt like the same thing, except for it was just slower. I was wanting to have Sean Connery turn into a ninja because I didn't hate it, but that's the worst thing in the movie is that if it sucks or you hate it, at least it's evoking something out of you. I said, wait a minute. I remember the second half was boring and I'm watching it. And as soon as I kind of got into it, I'm like, yep, let me brush one of my German Shepherd short-haired Czechoslovakian non-working line reds because I'm just like, what the hell else am I going to do? It just didn't work. And that's the worst thing. That's why it flopped. People didn't like that second half.
Patrick Kilpatrick was not used properly. He should have been used more as Brian Thompson was in most of his movies. Brian Thompson, and you see him in Fright Night 2, and I think he was also in Buffy. He's always that guy. Like, he's the guy, the creepy guy, that's going to beat you up. Patrick Kilpatrick just seemed like, he was in the wrong role.
I agree. So many goons in the 80s, and this is what you get. Patrick Bateman, third level. I mean, come on. I mean, Bolo Young would have been better. I mean, come on. Maybe you could have brought in a character that you find out at the end of the movie, kind of beats up Fred Ward, but somehow, survives thanks to the help of Chun, and you realize that's Chun's first student, which survived, which was his nephew, which was a character. Something like that would have been cool. But no, it's a friggin' dud.
Actually, it would have been better. Bring in Lance Henriksen.
He'd have been great. Absolutely.
As the guy that's tailing her, again, and gets him, have him be the heavy guy he has to go against.
Yeah. So after the first week or two, like I say, this didn't make a lot of movie. Critics were kind of split on a little bit. A lot of them were kind of like,
Yeah.
They didn't say, oh, this sucks, it's horrible. They're just like, it just kind of didn't work for me. And you know what? They're right, because it's true. We're both saying it, really.
It's the thing. It's the scenery was great. Like the settings are great and stuff. And then, there's a scene at the end where he's just hanging out the log. The guy's shooting at him.
Yes.
And the guy's got a rifle, and he keeps missing him. And I'm thinking, why doesn't what's his name just climb over to the other side of the log while he can't hit him? But it just felt like it's just like there's so many. I don't want to say that it's bad writing. It's just like maybe too many stunts, and they're just trying to work stunts into where they don't need to have a stunt, and they're trying to write it in like it doesn't fit. They're throwing it in there, like
right?
I don't know. It's like I felt like they needed to be more. If you would have brought in more martial arts to this, I think it would have been much more fun. We don't get to see him actually Fred Ward dodging bullets at the very end.
Yep.
And then they see him rubbing the stick with his fingers, and he throws it back, and he lights a gasoline fire and pulls up the truck. And
we've seen worse ninja stuff by this point.
Right. I'm just like it's just so weird, and I guess it's meant to set up for two more movies. I don't know who would be coming back other than just maybe Wllford Brimley and then the old man and him. Like, I don't know if the other girl would be back. It'd be a new love interest each movie, like James Bond. But it just felt like it was just kind of like really low budget. I mean, really low budget.
It was a high budget film, though.
I know. What, 40 million was the budget? I think it was, and
I don't even know, but I remember being very big at the time.
What was it? I think it's out here on IMDb. If it says it here or not, but no, but it just felt kind of weird. Like I said, made for TV movie, but you're giving it to an audience, and I think was it rated R or the PG-13? PG-13 for a tour movie. Like, it looks like, you look at the poster, you look at where he's hanging from the Statue of Liberty, which is like
it's great.
Which is true though.
See the movie,
but it's like it's clickbait. He doesn't actually hang from the Statue of Liberty. He hangs from the scaffolding around it. But honestly, I expected more professionalism. I'm trying to think. There was a 3 of the Condor. I think it was 3 Days of the Condor. That was a solid movie as far as him being a fugitive, being chased, and people shooting at him. and more spy stuff. This needed more of that. This guy felt like he's like, well, he just kind of just shows up and he like, does he know what he's doing? It felt like he just kind of like was just going, I'm gonna do this and hope it works.
Right.
Like he had no idea. It didn't feel structured. But I don't know. Maybe I'm being too cynical for the movie, but
no, because one of the things is that you've talked about, and I'm bringing it up now, is that like one of the worst things about a movie is that I get really aggravated when a movie's got potential, and I think it's just shooting itself in the foot. And I think this movie does it. I'm not going to say they played it safe, but to your point, and I think it's a valid argument, I didn't think of it this way because to me, I always felt like it was a juvenile movie, like a teenager kind of movie. I had no problem with the lack of guns and certain violence. But part of me is now wondering, because we're joking about Death Wish in chat and everything here with Charles Bronson. What would have happened if they said, we're going to make this a fucking R-rated movie. Screw James Bond. We're gonna amp it up. We're going to make it like Casino Royale and really go for it. There could have been something there, maybe.
It felt like on the same professionalism as If Looks Could Kill, with Richard Grieco.
I just can't take Richard Grieco seriously.
I know. But I mean, Fred Ward being in this kind of role, it felt like he was too old for it. Like they should have had a younger guy.
He was young. Remember in the 80s, if you're 16, you look like you're 35 in today's, physiques. You know what I'm saying?
Well, if I'm in New York, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, living in there.
Well, and here's the thing, too, is like we've talked about some different concepts and, not just decades, what was going pop culture-wise from your perspective or mine or the young 20-something Professor Pixels. And we've talked about how things have changed. Obviously, we're not getting into the PC part of it and everything.
Yeah.
I think one of the things we have not really talked about too much, and it's probably worth discussing just for a moment or two here, is I've mentioned one key concept for me as somebody watching a film. I'm not saying it's right, but I think it's valid from the general viewer's consensus here, is that if you don't care about somebody early on and you don't have that emotional anchor, why are you going to care? The plot doesn't even have to matter that much. So I can throw the silliness of some of the plot stuff out of the way. It doesn't bother me as much. I don't put it as high priority on it. You could say it's the story or the way it's told, but if you don't like the medicine going down, it doesn't matter if it's good for you. I think Fred Ward was good enough of a cast where you can find him as an anchor and it'd be okay. The bad guys are meaningless to me, so that's a negative. But the thing is I think they probably just said, well, if we do enough of this, that should be good enough because we have all this experience with all these Bond films, but other franchises. And I think they also, in the 80s fashion, tried making it safe for kids. And one of the gripes I've had in the 80s is that while there's pure, wonderful 80s stuff, a lot of times I've told you, like Rocky IV and other stuff, I just simply say it would not have existed if it wasn't the 80s. Because at this point, we had the 84 Olympics where we destroyed everybody. It was the last year with our amateurs that we really crushed it. There's this humongous amount of pro-America sentiment in there, and I can't explain it to anybody that hasn't lived it. More than anything, people might argue that Trump had in this couple of years, or what people might have said since then or before or whatever. It was just a great feeling. So everyone was really positive to go, we want our own James Bond. So everybody was kind of excited about that part to it. They didn't deliver on that. The soundtrack, forgettable. Now, the theme song was by Tommy Shaw, who was the guitarist for Styx, but Styx had just broken up because of the Mr. Roboto debacle that was very divisive for a lot of people. And so that wasn't even on the soundtrack. It was on his solo album, which is like, that year. So it's just, they really fucked up. If you're going to try to make a franchise, you got to not just play it safe. You got to be very solid, and you got to set things up, and you got to be definitive about it. You got to have an idea of where it's going to go. And unfortunately, whenever you and I have talked about series, I've said Westworld, nobody gives a shit about robots. Nobody gives a shit about political agendas through robots. Who gives a shit no matter how beautiful it looks or how many times you put Anthony Hopkins or all the money into it? Doesn't fucking matter. So you got two extremes here. You got this extreme where they spent a lot of money but played it safe. And then you've got the other extremes where, like Westworld or like Lord of the Rings, for example, nobody watched it. Let's be honest. I mean, you can just ruin it and think you've got something down. And we've talked about that nobody knows how to carry on a franchise. Keep it simple, stupid. Yep. Let's talk sequels for a minute. We've never talked what makes a sequel work. And we'll have to get into that a little bit because at least as I joke about the Ninja trilogy from Canon Classics that you referenced earlier, the first one with Franco Nero is goofy as hell, but cool. The second is the best ninja movie of all time. It's got Sho Kusugi in it, totally different. The third one, it's not, oh, they gender flipped it and had the girl in it. They also had the possession angle and golf course in modern LA. So you did something dramatically different with it.
Yeah.
To your point, and which is what I'm trying to get to here, is they did play it safe, and a lot of it was kind of rehashed stuff. Some of it could have been cool, but lean into what works. And the only thing that works in this movie for me, besides the stunt scenes and the training montages, is the potential relationship he could have had with his mentor, and they really didn't go there. They just didn't. And I know you didn't like it, and I understand that. I see that.
Yeah.
But nothing else worked in this movie.
Yeah, this is a movie that I actually paused halfway through, and then this came back to about around 6 o'clock my time, and watched it for the last hour, and kind of fast forward to the ending because it was like watching paint dry. It was just so bad for me. But talking about canon classics, American Ninja. That had a working actual lot better storyline, and this, like I said, this felt like it should have been like a Michael Dudikoff movie in the 90s. And I would have leaned more into basically having America, being a patriot. Do you want this to be the James Bond, but not the American version? Do you want this to be the Felix Leiter? Lean into it, do more. But obviously, I created the thumbnail. It's different. It isn't the original background thumbnail for that, or at least here and there it is. But they do have one of the DVDs where he's got to get the flag behind it. And I'm like, but it wasn't really an American movie though. It didn't feel like it was. The most American thing about the movie was a gift from the French, Statue of Liberty. Of course, the American military being corrupted by an evil arms dealer and stuff, and I can see some of the golden, not golden, but the Goldfinger kind of things, because Goldfinger was kind of like how they were infiltrated too and everything, with the Americans and just making them look like idiots. So I could see some of that in the writing. But like I said, I would. Fred Ward is like, he's kind of cocky, he's kind of, I guess you could say he's somewhat ruggedly handsome to the ladies,
I would agree.
But I would have had him. I would have had a different guy, other than Fred Ward.
You smell like hamburgers. But there's some interesting fun lines there. Like, what was it?
Yeah,
move like a pregnant yak.
I was trying to figure out what soap opera was he watching? Was it actually a real soap opera?
No. But soap operas are. I don't know how big they are today. I'm sure they're still huge, just like daytime TV. But back then, all that stuff was a staple. General Hospital, you name it. I mean, Dallas, everything at night was really popular. It's tough because we've even discussed backstage, man, should we do a soap opera or something that was popular? I mean, Dark Shadows, the revival, of course, we did all those episodes, and it was fun because Pixel and I just really marked out for it. It was just very dynamic, but it's tough because what was interesting about Jun's character was he was so pro his race and shitting on America in a way like, oh, it's obvious you don't know what the best, people on the planet is. It's Korean, and you lack the blah 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 blah. And it's like, that was funny that that they felt safe enough to make fun of Americans that way. Here's an American oaf showing it, and it was nobody really took that really hardcore seriously when they were watching the film. They thought it was, hey, it's funny. It's not the, oh my god, Britain's the best of.
Did you recognize
fun of all that?
Did you recognize one of the henchmen that was working with Grove?
I probably would if I did pay attention to the second half of the film.
Same year this movie came out, the guy started in Rocky IV. He was the handler for Drago, Michael Pataki.
Oh, okay, okay.
I saw. I was watching before. I watched the movie. I was like, I know that guy. I paused it. And I'm like, damn it, that's where I know him from. I don't know. Like I said, this movie could have been better than it was, but it went the way it was. I think it would have been better if he would have been like a buddy cop thing, buddy agent thing. They were trying to with the other guy, guy who recruited him. They were trying to do that, but then they like quickly ended that. I was just kind of like, that would have been much more interesting. Those two kind of working together,
Yeah, because by the time Jun shows up and starts training him, you realize, okay, it's supposed to settle into that. If they kept it as an R-rated film, the whole point where he comes in there and Wllford Brimley, who brings the goods in his films, he's sitting across from him and he's like, he's no nonsense. He's like, look, basically you've got two options. You can either work for us and do all this, or you're a dead man. And just the way he delivers, you're like, fuck Wllford, man. You're a stud. I mean, because, he's not really a heavy. I mean, he was a little weird in The Thing from a few years back, and he was on some TV and stuff. So, and Cocoon, I don't know if it had been out yet at this point, the first one.
Yeah.
But for him to deliver, I thought, man, they could do something with the dynamics of just this team. And then, of course, just have whatever generic plot going on in the background. And that would be interesting. Like, maybe you find out Crumbs really is an asshole and he's plotting to kill the main dude, but he needs to win over Chune's help, and they could have done stuff like that, but they don't do it. And so then they lean into the kind of the goofy stuff. And it's like, if you're going to do it, those guys should have teamed up. So I agree with you. Should have picked a certain direction and really dove into it rather than just kind of gloss over it.
Yes. Carl Winslow, aka Reginald VelJohnson. He's the ambulance driver, gets his ambulance stolen in the beginning.
Yep. That's
right. And honestly, that's where the movie kind of like go after he steals that and then gets interrogated by the guy. Like that's when the movie kind of like starts to sour for me a little bit. I was hoping for more action and just, instead we got these the odd couple living together, and it wasn't really much at all. He doesn't really do anything, until like a good hour into the movie. That's what
watch it until the Statue of Liberty, then you can turn it off.
Yeah.
I mean, for me.
I mean, the jokes, how to pleasure a woman, tap the wrist, and if they would have played that out longer and actually have him where he's with with the girl at the end, and he's tapping her wrist, he's like, "What the hell are you doing?" "Oh, nothing." That would have been much more funnier.
Yeah.
But they spoiled it by having him like, oh, he taps it and then he's like, all right, now give me the rice, or they kind of like ruined the joke. I was like, oh, that would have much more cooler. But honestly,
the books were a lot more hardcore than the movie. That's one of the problems some of the hardcore people had. I'd only read a couple of them because I'd had some Bond books and this and that, and they would always do like when a movie comes out, let's put something, let's hire somebody to write a book on it if it wasn't a book. And so I remember some people that were a little older that were like, man, this is going to be different than Bond. Here's some books, go read them. And you're like, hey, this is cool. This is different, but they don't lean into it.
As of 2022, they were trying to reboot this and turn it into a TV series. Mm-hmm. Nothing really's going to happen with it since then. Man.
There's meat on the bone there. There's something here.
There is. He could do something with this. Like I said, try to make it more into a rebooted version of Kung Fu: The Legend Continues, because that's basically what this was. He didn't use a gun. He wouldn't use weapons. This is literally what Kung Fu: The Legend Continues was. The guy was a cop, and David Carradine basically had taught him kung fu and all stuff, and they worked and solved cases together. You could just do that show. I mean, honestly, because David Carradine, if you had David Carradine or anybody else other than the old guy, Joel Grey, I think it would have been a lot better. But like I said, this movie did not know what it wanted to be. It felt like it was just out of its decade. Because we would say mid 80s, 85, and going up is when we're pro America.
Yep.
Real American, stuff. And it just felt like it was kind of like they made it in 83 and then just sat for a while and then they brought it in and it wasn't made for the time, if it makes sense.
I don't know. I think it was actually. I think it was the right time. It's a frustrating movie because, like I say, there's something there. And now I'll just close with this. I'd made a comment, I think, on one of our streams before, whether it was the Columbo season 1, episode 6 or something else. I made a comment that I saw a recent movie that was a spider movie. And it was a low budget Australian horror movie. I think it was called Sting. And they lean into the heavy dark stuff. And I thought this could have been one of the better spider movies of all time. But the problem is, like I said at the beginning of this movie, we're talking about Chun, we're talking about everything. We're not talking about Fred Ward's character. He's kind of boring. He's just there. And that's the writer's fault, not his. Yeah. But in a spider movie, there's this 12-year-old girl that, there's a tiny little meteor that lands in their house. And there's a spider in this egg and she kind of cares for it, but it grows really quick. And it's a smart spider and things happen and the spider stuff's done good, but you don't really like her. So later in the movie, when you have to rally around her, it doesn't do any good. So they violated that fundamental principle I mentioned at the beginning, is that if you don't have a moral anchor, and usually that's as simple as just liking somebody or rooting for somebody, then the fucking movie doesn't matter what happens or how good it looks or anything. Nobody gives a shit, and that's a problem. So to me, they violated that because we're supposed to be rooting for Fred Ward's character, and instead of some interesting angle that they could have did it's Choon's character and dynamic. It's just, this is a classic case of they watered it down 80s style, like the Goonies. You know, you and I, you know, the Goonies were like, yeah, what's the big deal? And it's like, oh, the Goonies. And it's just pure rubbish in that it's just such, it's a sugar high. And there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you like. It's a good looking film. You like to have adventures, you know, with kids. That sounds funny. No pun intended. And so it's neat, but it's just, there's a party that's rebelling going, no, give me First Blood. Give me some real shit in the 80s. This movie just kind of said, oh, let's play it safe like a lot of other 80s films. And I wish it didn't do that. Shame on you, Remo Williams. The adventure will not continue, sir.
So it's safe to say that the people at Canon saw this movie and decided, you know what, we can do it better, and made it called it Invasion USA.
Canon's like, Remo, we don't need you.
we got
Chuck Norris whatever he wants, and everybody else gets $1 million, and they can do what they want. And we'll make
right. Because literally, I'm trying to think of like, who would you if they had done this movie, but you chose somebody else? I would have at the time Chuck Norris, and I think this would have been a monster hit.
Are you fucking kidding me? Every people went to ape shit over this. This has been like the Octagon Part 2.
Yeah.
I mean, oh my God, that would have been fantastic.
Chuck Norris holding on to like the log at the end, and just like, and then he's like,
it just stares at him.
Yeah, he just stares like,
my money, Chuck. Stare at him.
The guy shoots him, and he's like, he stares at him and is like, screw you, jackass. Let's go. Because I've seen here where Fred lets the log go and it rolls down, hits the thing. That would have been a moment right there, like close up. He's like, "Fuck you," and let's let it go. But instead, there was nothing like that. He just lets it go, and he just kind of hangs. And he's like, I was just like, that's the thing. It's like, you know, if you want to have, instead of having the old man, you could have Chuck Norris, and here's the other guy. He's, you know, helping all. He's like, what took you so long? You know, like a missing combat, you know, or missing in action. Sorry. Like that's the stuff I love. This just felt like it was just like you took a guy who was in his 30s, late 30s, you know, trying to teach him, like, you know, for what, the whole hour, first half of the whole hour movie, first half was to him training, and then the second half is just kind of like, okay, I'm gonna go here and do this, and then, you know, and just it didn't work, and it's clearly evidence. If you watch this movie, it shows why it didn't work. Yep. Now, for those who diehard fans that love this, I respect you guys. You know, like what you like, man. It just didn't work for me, and unfortunately, it didn't work for a lot of people. And that's,
I give them credit; they tried it, and you know, not a lot of people try big budget stuff. I mean, had a good theme song when he's on the Statue of Liberty, and they're playing the music, and he lands. He lands like that was the best part of the movie. You're right, Statue of Liberty scene. Yep. But I think of the 80s, that pops to my mind because that's so America.
And then you get the World Trade Center shot behind there and everything, and get all the stuff. The Statue of Liberty. It's just like, yeah.
You have not been to New York, you said, correct?
I've never been to New York, and I probably will not go to New York because of the crime.
I've been to New York a couple times. I've been to the Statue of Liberty once. It's impressive. I gotta say, it's pretty incredible. So watching it now, when I watched it before, I hadn't been in New York. I'd only been through it.
Yeah.
But as an adult, having been in New York once or twice, and having been to the Statue of Liberty there, rewatching it again, that's where we've talked about before. One of the things that we probably didn't say, even though we said we love the action scenes, a lot of practical effects in here. So I really appreciated what they did on there because of the way they filmed it stuff. It's like a movie that came out a year or two ago called Fall, where these two girls climb up a radio tower and they get stuck. Tremendous film, where you get kind of seasick watching it. It just is impressive to me, and it feels very American. But that's about it. So yeah. Anything else? Any final thoughts?
Final thoughts is that well, if you haven't seen this movie and you want to go see a movie, it's really the only place you can really watch it is through Fandango.
I saw it on Prime, where I'm here in Florida, without having to pay for it. So it's definitely
I don't have Prime, so I mean I had to pay for it, so I got it through Vudu.
Was it on Tubi then?
No, it was for a while, and then Tubi kicked it off.
Gotcha.
Because somebody watched
like
it.
They did with TJ Hooker, those bastards. Yeah.
It was on there for, I swear, it was on Tubi for like 3 years.
Yeah. What was an 80s film that we'd mentioned had come up in some lists over the years in our top 10s and everything too. We've been doing a lot of martial arts films. We wanted to kind of reach out and do something a little bit different and talk about some of these themes here and all that. So I think it was a good movie to cover too, because it's one that people just don't talk about in the 80s. But it probably is more noted for, besides the Statue of Liberty, the fact that it was supposedly going to be a James Bond alternative. And at that time, with Bond being kind of on hold and the way movies were going, again, right movie, right time, wrong result. And it's your fault, Remo Williams. I blame you guys. I wanted to like it more than I did.
I blame Wllford Brimley for not carrying the movie.
Don't you dare, disrespect Wllford Brimley, sir.
All he had to do is talk about diabetes.
And oatmeal.
Oatmeal.
All right, guys. Thanks for watching and listening. Have a good night. As always, stay extreme. Good night now.
Yep. Later, guys.